Chris, with the competition from the secret scrimmage this past weekend, if I'm not mistaken, what are some of the biggest things that you've taken away from that?
Yeah. Well, it's a great opportunity for us. I think it's one of those NCAA rules they came up with a few years ago that made a lot of sense. So really, you just want to get your team better, and that means like trying to get some carryover from everything you've worked on in practice, and then when those lights come on and you're playing against an opponent, just make sure your identity shows up. And I thought we did that. We had a successful day in that regard. Also, you're just looking for playing time for certain players. Trying to get that valuable video or film you can watch when you get back. Looking at different guys playing together. This year's team, we have a lot of depth, a lot of interchangeable parts. We can play big, we can play small, and so we accomplished a lot with our closed door scrimmage, for sure.
Chris, I know you can't quote talk about that, but is that a 40-minute game where you play it like a college game, or do you do, hey, we want to work on some stuff, you want to work on some stuff? How does that?
Yeah, everybody does it a little different. We've done it before where it's just segments, not necessarily a 40-minute game. Other years we have played a 40. We almost always play more than 40, and so to give some of our younger guys some chance to run at the end a little bit, but definitely kind of a game feel because it's the first time you're out there playing against somebody else. Obviously, scouting's not at a normal level because you don't really have much on that regard. A lot of self-scout that day, just trying to do what you do. And we always kind of take that philosophy. What we do is always more important than the opponent. But certainly scouting and preparation is a big part of college basketball. For your young guys, it's just kind of the first time they get out there when the lights are on, so that's always interesting, letting those guys play through a few mistakes and then see if the day can kind of calm down for them. Again, carryover is a big word in athletics and coaching and winning. Coach Knight would talk about it all the time. We have an identity. We have some things that we try to get done every day in practice. Then the goal, it sounds simple, is just to make sure those things show up on game day. And, we want to be a team that pressures the ball. We want to be a team that respects defense every possession. And so it was nice to get out there against some great competition and kind of challenge ourselves.
Chris, did Brandon and Musa play in that? How did you kind of handle that with the uncertainty?
Yeah, they did not play. That's a NCAA rule. These guys can't play in the closed doors or the scrimmages or exhibitions until they're cleared to play.
What does it do? I know you got to prepare for all eventualities here. So if they aren't available to you, how does that change the makeup of the roster, rotations, and stuff like that? Yeah,
it impacted, no doubt, obviously. But every season's impacted. A guy gets banged up from time to time. A guy's in foul trouble. A guy's sick. I've never coached a good player that misses a game because he's sick. But from time to time, you get a not so veteran player choose that route. But coaching, it's all about adapting. It's all about expecting the unexpected. And so we got a little bit of a challenge right now with two of our best players with some uncertainty, but the goal goes on, and I've made sure that everyone in our organization understands that. The goal is to win. We have different avenues and plans to get there, regardless of who plays or who doesn't play.
Guys like Rashad Marshall, I would assume TJ would be one of them if Brandon can't play. I mean, which guys are you looking to maybe take on those minutes if those guys aren't available, right? Who are the ones that really shine so far, I guess?
Well, we're still wide open. I mean, we're in open competition now. I can't tell you who will start in our game on Monday here in the exhibition. We're a team right now where we practice every day and the stat sheet's rolling, and guys are going to, get what they earn. And so right now we've got, 13 or 14 active players. No decisions have been made on anything like that.
I guess being a week out from the exhibition, just team health-wise, is it kind of where it needs to be?
Like all teams, we've had some guys banged up. We've had some guys miss some practices, but for the most part, we're blessed right now to be here. Such a huge part in sports is, getting a little fortunate with the injury bug. And we've coached a lot of teams over the years. You play the what-if game, but every coach and every team could do that. So, for the most part right now, we've had our full unit from the first practice till I think tomorrow is our 16th practice or something like that, maybe 17. So, again, we're on the home stretch here.
Coach, so much
newness with new staff, you know, a lot of new players. We're listening to them talk about bonding and you know, basically TJ's trust in y'all. That's an important element, is it not?
Yeah, I appreciate TJ saying that. TJ's a really smart guy, and so when he says something, he means it. So, yeah, I recognize and agree with what he said. This team put a lot of time and effort into relationship building this summer, preseason, and we still continue to do that today. You know, I've said it before. We're fighting a lot of challenges year one, and at the top of that list, in my opinion, is time. You know, we're going to compete against staffs that have been together longer than ours has. We're going to compete against teams that have played together longer than ours has. As a team, we've never played a game yet. So I think to do that, you know, we value that. We're trying to form those relationships, and you know, the next step is how connected are we going to be when adversity hits? And we had some adversity in our closed door scrimmage, which every game is going to bring you. And I thought for the most part we kind of fought through. We look like we're going to be a team that kind of sticks together. It's still early, but that's our hope.
Zach Marath, Rebel Walk. We were 3 to 4 weeks into full practices now. Just what about this team has stood out to you?
I think a lot of things. I think from a positive standpoint, we do have a lot of versatility. I think we can play different ways, which is always an ingredient of competitive good teams. So there's just different ways we can play, whether that be extending our defense or whether that be guarding the ball screens in different ways. I think offensively we have a lot of talented players. And again, we can play in different ways. We can play through the post. We can play a 5-out. We can play at different tempos. So that's been a positive. I think from a concern area, every coach and every team has concerns right now. We still got to find that next level of consistency. You know, I would tell you that we've had some really good practices, but I don't think we've put a full one together. We've had some really good 40-minute scrimmages, but we haven't put a full 40 minutes on the floor yet. That includes the other day. So I think just consistency, individual players being consistent, and then ultimately our team, you know, just doing what we're supposed to do for 40 minutes, not for 28 minutes or not for, you know, the first part of practice, but just, you know, becoming that team that can do the right thing time after time. And really, in my mind, that's discipline, you know, and you know, we have enough talent right now to block out. You know, we know how to block out. We teach it. We coach it. The players can do it. But from time to time, there's a possession where we don't block out. And, you know, it's like I tell the players, did we forget? No, we're just not disciplined enough to do it. And, you know, when we get to that next level of consistency with discipline and we're just doing the right things time after time, you know, I think our team could be, you know, a very difficult team to play against this year.
Talked a lot about guys like Musa and Brandon, obviously, those high marquee transfers, but Juju was a big add, so was Austin Nunez. What really drew you to those guys, potential additions, and what have they brought so far, specifically at point where you had a need there?
Yeah, all of our transfers have lived up to expectations in terms of just their talent and what we identified in recruiting. They've all done their part of the deal to this point, just in terms of the price to pay to play at Ole Miss. You know, this isn't an easy program to play in, and we recognize that. But it's not easy to win. You know, to me, there's a handful of programs around the country before the season ever starts that have a chance to compete. And one of our first objectives here in Oxford is to become one of those teams that we're going to be a part of the fight. You're never going to win the fight unless you're in the fight. So individually, I think our coaching staff and recruiting, we identified some guys, and I don't know if there's been any surprises, but a lot of our guys have met expectations. You know, the next step is our team. You know, I think these guys have shown the ability to want to play together, but we just gotta become more consistent.
That same vein with Austin Nunez, it seems like he's gone through a lot of adversity over the last 3 years. Obviously, the concussion that was suffered last year, and then I think not playing his entire junior year, if I'm not mistaken. Just kind of, to what degree have you kind of seen that mentality from him, just not taking anything for granted, just considering what could happen?
Yeah, I think I don't know if best is the word, but one of the first things I always think about with Austin, felt this way when I watched him play in high school and on the summer circuit, and certainly in recruiting him and now getting a chance to coach him, is, you know, he's a guy that cares. He wants to be great, and he puts a lot of time into it. It's emotional for him. He cares, and to me, that's the first step on being great about something. So, you know, whether it's an early morning workout or whether it's a practice or a game. He wants to do well. His heart's in the right place. He's a talented young player. And to me, there's almost two ways to look at Austin Nunez. You look at him as a transfer from a Pac-12 school, and it kind of brings these expectations. Or you look at him as the young guy he is. Played a few college basketball games last year, had some adversity. And I think when you evaluate him and you understand how much time he has left, and then you combine that with what kind of heart he has and how good he wants to be, I think there's no ceiling on how good he could be. His thing is just trying to, find the value in every single day. We tell our guys, run your own race. That's our terminology in our program, and it's just so true, not only for Austin, but all guys. But Austin's a talented young guy. He's playing on a veteran Ole Miss team, and so for him just to keep plugging away, I think he's got a great future in college basketball.
I guess you heard me ask Judy basically the same question, but I know Jamin never actually entered the portal, but you still kind of had to recruit him back to a certain extent. But him being there so early and being active and kind of getting transfer players and trying to make them feel comfortable here, what does it mean to have a player like that, to inherit a player like that right away in order to expedite that process of building a team in year one?
Yeah, with all the players, there's a decision to be made when there's a coaching change, but there's also decisions to be made for our staff. So it's not like you get the job. I think it was right here in this press conference. You walk out, you get a chance to meet with the players. It's not like we're begging guys to stay, and it's not like guys are begging us to stay. A conversation has to be had. And all those guys did a great job being very transparent and listening and talking, including the guys that chose to go to other places. I got a lot of respect for all the players who were on Kermit's team last year, and there was a lot of transparency in the coaching change. And we hope that the five guys that decided to stay, that we decided to value them coming back. I hope it works out for both sides, and I'm optimistic it will. And again, we wish the best of luck to the guys that went other places. Brakefield specifically. You guys are dead on. He's special. Brake's a guy that doesn't just think about himself. He's kind of got that DNA where he thinks big picture, and other words known as leadership, right? And Brake's got a full-time job just taking care of himself around here. Trying to learn a new system and trying to excel in the expectations that we've placed on him that are very high. We're asking him almost for perfection. But in my opinion, he's got a chance to play professional basketball, and certainly that's what pro ball is. You either get the job done or you don't. So with all that Brake has going on himself, he still finds time to think about others, whether it be the young guys or the veterans, and certainly in the recruiting process, he was special. And I never take that for granted. When this recruiting starts, it's like every day. It's not just weekend visits. We got midweek visits, phone calls, Zooms, next visits, and Brake went above and beyond. And I've thanked him several times in front of everybody in the organization. He worked really, really hard in recruiting for us. Again, at the same time, while he's working really, really hard on his craft, and full-time student, set to graduate from Ole Miss this May. He's taking a full load of classes this semester and in the spring. So, but he's a guy that he's got a lot of discipline. Brake gets up in the morning. He knows exactly what he's got to do, and most days he gets it done.
Chris, those teams you mentioned a couple questions back that are in the fight at the beginning, like you were talking about, what do they have?
Well, I think the first thing you got to do, it's a talent-based business, and you got to have players in this league. Really, if you think about it, you got to have guys that you got to have an NBA player or two, maybe more. It's a good study for one of you guys. It'd be a good article. Find me an SEC champion that didn't have an NBA player, a draft pick, and I know certainly in the Big 12 we studied that, and there was no exception. So you got to have real players. You got to have guys that are improving. You just got to have talent. That's the first thing. The next thing, I've always thought you can't beat yourself. And I think, the legendary Coach Walsh from the 49ers, he wrote one of the best books I thought was ever written. I don't know if he wrote it, but somebody wrote it with his help. And this was before, the internet, before all the information that any of us can grab these days by just Googling. And it was one of those first books, in my opinion, just kind of legendary because you had a Hall of Fame coach, somebody that was elite, maybe the best at what he did ever. And he basically just had a book that wasn't fluff, and it was just a lot of truth in there. And I know I remember reading it at a young age, and I couldn't get enough of it. I still read it once a year to this day, but he talks a lot about, you know, when the NFL season starts, there's X amount of teams. How many teams is that now? 32. I think maybe the time the book was read, it might have been 30. But, you know, you got these teams, and there's only a handful that are even going to give themselves a chance to be relative come playoff and Super Bowl time because, you know, a lot of teams beat themselves. And, you know, the main ways you beat yourself is selfishness, you know, guys not knowing their roles, off the court distractions and these kinds of things. And so, you know, the first step for us here at Ole Miss is to become a team that's not going to beat ourselves. All the way down to basketball. You know, the last couple minutes of the game, you can't take bad shots or turn it over. You can't mess up defensive assignments and let the best three-point shooter for the other team get an open look. So, but then also just internally, you know, your culture, your chemistry, your toughness, your discipline. You can't beat yourselves. So I think that's always the next thing. You know, do you have talent? We do. You know, and I don't, you know, apologize for that. I don't. Again, I've said don't put an asterisk next to this first year's team. We got good players. Next step is can we get a culture that doesn't beat itself? You know, when times are tough, can we respond? When times are good, can we stay humble and keep it going? You know, then you got to have a little fortune along the way. You know, we've already talked about this today. It's like you got to get a little lucky along the way in terms of guys getting banged up and being valuable to play as the season goes on. Then lastly, I think you just got to execute, and I think to me that's just discipline. You know, like. We know how to set a flare screen around here. We know how to read the defense. We know how to do it. Why don't we do it every single time? You know, the answer is discipline. And, you know, I try to make my bed every day. It's just one of those things. I saw somebody read that one day. It made a lot of sense to me. You know, you start the day with a little discipline. You feel a little bit better when you get home late at night that the bed's made. And, you know, my daughters, I got 2 of my 3 daughters do that. You know, they make that bed every day. And but I don't, and I wish I could. Why don't I? I'm not disciplined enough every morning to do that, and it's something that I think about. And basketball is no different. Like, we know how to read a pick and roll. We know how to block out. We know how to rotate. Why don't we do it every time? It's just discipline, and so that's a big part of what we're trying to accomplish right now with our guys.
Do you know when you'll get an answer on Brandon and Musa?
I do not. As soon as I know, I'll tell you guys. We'll have a press conference. We'll throw one on you quickly. Hell, I might even tweet it.
Chris, Cam Dyer, WCBI. You were talking about the adversity y'all faced in the scrimmage. Just when you have so many new pieces, and you said they handled it rather well, just how good is it to see so early those guys meshing, and when the times get a little tough, that they stay together as a team?
It was a big positive. Yeah, it was a big positive. You know, as coaches, we're always trying to create adversity. You've heard it before in sports. You know, you ask your players, do you want practice to be easier than a game or harder than a game? And, you know, most guys that know what they're doing, it's an easy answer. You know, you want to push yourselves every day. So we've created a lot of adversity along the way. You know, our practices have been very intense, very physical. We've had some inter squads, including several all the way back from the summertime where we bring in officials and stuff. So in all those 40-minute, you know, games or scrimmages, there's always runs. College basketball is a game of runs. And so we've seen an ability to respond, but certainly playing some outside competition, we saw those same strengths. And so that's a positive sign. And next step will be, you know, playing here at home, playing in front of fans at some point. You know, it'll be interesting to see if what we think and what we think we've created is real.
I think it was a week ago, maybe 2, where you had, I think, 18 NBA scouts here and observed your team and all that. Not specifically about one player, but just what's kind of the general feedback that you got from some of them, if you had any dialogue with them about, I guess, your roster as a whole and with some of the guys who may have a chance to go to that next level?
Yeah, it's always a cool part of college basketball, especially this time of year. It's when the NBA scouts come by. It wasn't just that one kind of practice that some stuff got out. Media-wise on it, we average several NBA scouts at every one of our practices this time of year. So a lot of those guys are friends. They're basketball guys. A lot of them are former college coaches and stuff. So it's good to see people. You know, in our business, it's hard to send out Christmas cards and vacation every spring. You know, we don't get Christmas break. We don't get a spring break. We don't really get much of summer anymore, and certainly not complaining. It's the lifestyle we all choose. And basketball pays back so much more than it takes. But But on a relationship level, it's good to see those guys. Yeah, those guys give feedback. We got some good players. We have some players that are in the running for future drafts. It's in basketball people, you're always interested in their opinion. And I think at this point, I think guys are respecting how hard we're playing. And we look like a unit that plays for each other. So we got a lot of positives right now.
No questions for Coach?
Another thing on this marketing deal I started with, so just the ability, once we start these things more regularly, just to kind of give you guys an update on everything that's going on. And I thank you for getting the word out, but then I also ask you, please, to help us get the word out. But one thing with marketing, to start the year, we've got the 3 home games at the Pavilion, and then that 4th game is the Tadpad game. And the Tadpad game is obviously going to be kind of limited attendance, and I believe it'll be a great just a great night for everybody in Oxford, not just the basketball game, but to honor that arena and everybody that contributed to that arena in some way, and certainly bringing back Coach Evans is going to be special coming back. So one thing we've said with the students is there's going to be some type of ticket monitoring device in these first 3 home games, and for students to get priority access to the Tadpad game to give themselves a chance to get into that Tadpad game, then come to the first 3 games. And if you come to the first 3 games of the year, you're going to have some kind of access. I don't know if they're going to do that with some kind of physical ticket or monitoring their student ID, but they're basically attendance is going to be kept at the first 3 home games of the year. And it's my understanding that if students show up to 2 of the first 3 home games, because I know there's a road football game in there during that time, so we wanted to be sensitive to that because we want all the students to support the football team, period. But yeah, if I'm a student at Ole Miss, make sure I go to 2 of those first 3 home games, hopefully all 3, and that gives me a better chance to get into the Tadpad game on that 4th game. So appreciate y'all as we get closer to the season. I don't think it's a tomorrow's story because, I don't know, when I was in college, I had about an 8-hour attention span, so don't want to put it out there too early, but that's something we've got looking forward to. And certainly just kind of promotions and special things with each game. We'll try to give you guys that information early. And again, thank you in advance for everything that you do to kind of help promote the program. And we're excited this first year. We have all types of objectives this first year. Top of the list is to win every game on the schedule. But there's some other things that are really important as we build the program, as we build this fan base, just getting the word out there, whether it be game times or special promotions going on, things for the student section, season ticket holders, and this kind of thing. And I would encourage anybody that hasn't gotten tickets to get them. It's my understanding all the priority access and the VIP type seatings are sold out at this point, which is great news. There's only a few season tickets left, so I just really encourage people to get the tickets now because I confidently predict there'll be a day where you can't get a ticket here once we get this thing rolling sooner than later. But I think there's an opportunity right now for Ole Miss fans and Rebel Nation to jump on board with us. Also, as I've had six months or so here to study this job, and again, a lot of respect for Kermit and AK and all the people that we followed and appreciate everything they did. And we're going to try to make everybody proud here, moving the program forward. But we have an unbelievable fan base in terms of our season ticket holders. But a lot of our season ticket holders might not necessarily live in Oxford. And we appreciate their support. We appreciate their financial contribution, buying the tickets. But the next step for us here at Ole Miss to build a real contender would be every single night having a home court advantage, whether we play on a Monday night or a Saturday, whether you've got something going on where you can't come to a game. It's almost impossible in today's world to ask a fan to come to every game over the course of a basketball season. But what I don't think it's too much to ask, and what we'll ask very clearly throughout the year with a consistent message is for our season ticket holders on the nights where they can't come to the games to take that just extra time and effort and make sure somebody sits in your seat, whether it's somebody you go to church with or a family member, or somehow, some way, make sure your tickets are used that game. We haven't had much of a problem here at all in recent years in terms of selling tickets. We've had a little bit of an issue of people actually coming to the game and sitting in the seats. And again, we're all busy. We have families, we have lives, things pop up. So to me, the objective isn't to come to every single game, even though we have special people that make that commitment. I think the agenda is for people to care enough to make sure that someone sits in their seats that night. And all the way down to the point where, like, if they're season ticket holders and there's a game that you know you can't come to, just call the office. Swing the tickets by, give them to me. I'll personally make sure that somebody sits in those seats on game night. So that'll be a big message that we're going to try to get done year one, because I think we get the students coming to the games, which I'm confident we will. We get the season ticket holders coming to the games, using their tickets. I'm just very optimistic where we can get this crowd very, very quickly. This is one of the premier fan bases in all of college athletics. It's not just my opinion. I'm not sitting up here giving coaches speech. I mean, I go to an Ole Miss football game. I go to a volleyball game. I went to a baseball game in the spring. I'm very aware of what Coach Yo has built here. It's here. It's undeniable. So in men's basketball, we're going to do our part. We're working really hard at it, and we're going to ask a lot of our fan base. We really need your help. I hope we can have a great crowd at this exhibition game on Monday. It's my understanding it's free. There's no ticketing. Just show up and get in. And certainly on Monday night when the whole season starts, just encourage anybody to please come out to the game. Our players are working really hard. I think we're going to be a fun team to watch. We're going to try to win every game. And from time to time, when we run out of time, I think the fans will still be really pleased with what they saw. The guys are trying really hard. I'm excited to coach this first Ole Miss team. Thank you.